In November, SMCPS hosted 3 nights of community forums, where parents, students, and community members could come together to discuss the possible options of redistricting in St. Mary's County Public Schools. The forums were located in the northern, southern, and central areas of St. Mary's. These options were discussed by the participants, and the comments will be taken into consideration before the recommendations go before the Board of Education. The following presentation was presented each night.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Watson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for St. Mary's County Public Schools. On behalf of Dr. Smith, our Superintendent, and our Board of Education, I just want to welcome everyone this evening. Thank you for your attendance, and thank you for engaging with us in this process. As we go through tonight, just as a reminder, what you see in front of you, these are possible options. These are not finalized options. Again, these are possible options that were developed jointly with Canaan Design, which you'll hear from this evening. I'd like to introduce our guests this evening from Canaan Design, who will be providing you with the information in the presentation. To my immediate right, Mr. Lee Wong. Next to Lee is Ms. Kia St. Louis. And next to Kia is Mr. Paul Mills. They will be engaging with you this evening, going through our possible options. Just to let everyone know, again, this is our last evening of 3 nights of possible option presentations. We started down at George Washington Carver. Last night we were at Chaptacon High School, and we will wrap up tonight here at the Forest Center.
It's good to see you all tonight, some of you for the second time. Last time we were here for Community Forum 1 for a couple nights, so thank you to those who came back, and thank you to those who are engaging with us for the first time for Community Forum 2. My name is Kia like the car and St. Louis like the city. It is real, just for the record. And tonight we are going to be talking, as Mike said, about possible options. The agenda for tonight is just a welcome back exercise. Then we're going to talk through survey results. Then we're going to look at the possible options and do a recap. All right, first real question. What is your primary relationship to SMCPS? So parents, there are mostly parents in the room, some folks wearing more than one hat. A few teachers. To the students in the room, thank you for coming. I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but thank you for coming. Second question, which high school theater are you affiliated with? Now, if you are a teacher who teaches at multiple schools, for example, if you're a music teacher that teaches at multiple schools, you can select not your favorite, but maybe your most preferred. Okay, so not super surprising that Leonardtown is winning, given that we are between Leonardtown Middle School and Leonardtown High School, so as expected. So we ask these questions because there are who's in the room questions. We've asked these every 3 nights, and night 1 we were down at George Washington Carver. Earlier we were at Chaptacon, and today we're here. And every day we've gotten a different spread of who's in the room, which means for feelings about these options, they've been different, right? Because some folks are affected by one option, and so that's gonna rank really low for them, and some folks are not affected, so they're like, go ahead, do that one. So this is really to level set for everybody in the room of, there are some folks, Chaptacon and Great Mills, who aren't as well represented, so the sentiments in these rooms might just be a little focused on Leonardtown, and that's perfectly fine. But it's to remember that there are other folks that are affected by these options as well. Our process is we are at the possible options. So we are at step 1 of our decision pathway, right? So we've done the principles and data. We've started to build the options, and we're at the top point of where the options have been built, and we're presenting them back to you as we start our decision-making process. There are 8 steps left after this, so this is not the end. This is not the only time that we are going to be presenting these to you, that there will be opportunity for conversation with you guys around these options. This is just a reminder of what these options are built on. They're built on the principles of Community Forum 1 and the data that we gathered from the school district, and your survey responses, which is what's next. Our goals for today are to review with you the survey options, and then we're going to review the possible options that we've developed as well. And just a reminder that the facility utilization and school boundary study will focus on utilization across facilities and cost, capacity, and enrollment, but it won't go into the nitty-gritty of seating plans or design standards or fixtures and furniture. We're staying at a higher level of school boundary and growth and community needs, and not at the individual needs of new auditorium seating, though that very well might be true somewhere. On Community Forum 1, we also talked about the things that were on the table or off the table. And so the ones that are on the table were included facility outcomes, repairing, upgrading facilities, demolishing, replacing, repurposing facilities, acquiring land, divesting from facilities. They also were program outcomes that we talked about, including new and expanded educational programs, expanded pre-K, career and tech academy expansion, and portfolio and policy options. And some of those were feeder alignments, attendance and zoning changes, grade reconfiguration, and school consolidation and closure. So we used some of these principles as a way to build the options, as those were the things that we had agreed to be on the table. Survey outcomes. So we were really proud to see a huge number of responses from you all. We got 3,467 responses. That is a great showing. It isn't everyone, because this is a school district of 17,000 students, right? But it is a good sample for us to start to look at options and base options off of. When we look at the dispersion of who responded, the biggest group are parents and guardians of current or future SMCPS students. We are not surprised to see that. But what is good is that we had kind of everybody represented, and folks were allowed to select more than one answer. So if they were a parent and a business member, or a business owner, or a current student, you were allowed to click more than one. And so we love to see that every group that we were tracking was represented in the survey. We also broke the information down by school affiliations. So these are the elementary schools and who responded from each elementary school. The highest one being Evergreen Elementary School, and again, you were allowed to select more than one for this option as well. So Evergreen Elementary School had 467 responses. The runner-up to that was Leonardtown Elementary School. And then when we look at middle school and high school options as well, we had Esperanza and Leonardtown Middle School being the highest there, with Leonardtown High School being the highest response for the high schools, but Chopticon and Great Mills were also well represented as well. The good news in these two slides is that everyone was well represented, and that was nice to see as well. We also had some folks who had their kids going to charter schools or to private schools who also answered the survey, which was good to see because it shows that they're still interested in what happens in the school district. And some people expressed that they might come back depending on what options were presented for them. Okay, into the results. So we asked a question of how do you feel when you're in your school buildings in 3 ways: proud, safe, and comfortable. And you answered positively for all 3. For feeling safe and feeling comfortable, you answered 80% and 79% respectively. And feeling proud is 67%. And I know that seems low for the students in the room. You're like, that's a D. But it is actually a higher percentage than we typically see when we ask the same question around the country. So it is a good score for SMCPS. We asked importance to school experience. We said rank the following in terms of how important they are to school experience, 1 being your highest. Overwhelmingly, security and safety was the number 1 that folks ranked. Following to that, the second number 1 ranked was access to advanced subjects. And then rounding that out was access to a wide range of subjects and physical, social, and emotional wellness. We asked a few trade-off questions, 1 being, I prefer to move to a newer or modernized school a little further away over remaining in an older building closer to home. 53% of respondents would not prefer to move to a newer or modernized building a little further away. So that was good information to have. We then asked the quality of educational and student support programs is more important than small school size and convenient location, and we got 60% of respondents believing than that. Now I'm going to go back to the question before, because when we asked it this way, folks said quality of education and student support programs are more important. But here they would rather be in a building closer to home. But then they're saying quality is more important than location, right? And that's the kind of data that we want to see and understand, because those are sometimes the trade-offs that we see across options when we're building options, because location is something that we think of, but when we put it in one context, it's not very important. Then when we put it in another context, it might be important. We asked to rate your level of agreement. Funding for school facilities should be allocated to benefit as many students as possible. And 84% of respondents believe that to be true. That was nice to see as well, because it means in our options we should have a nice spread of the ability for schools to be funded well across the district and not just in certain areas. And a lot of that has to do with how many students a school has versus another school. Regarding importance for decision making, we asked you to rank the following factors based on their importance when making decisions regarding redistricting, and the number one response overwhelmingly was affecting the fewest number of families. The second to that was keeping students from the same neighborhoods in the same schools. And so our options really focused around making those two possible as however we could or wherever we could. Another question we asked you was around conditions for supporting consolidations or closures. And we asked which of the following conditions are good reasons to support school consolidation affecting your family. And the top of responses were better funded teachers and educational programs, district provided transportation to and from school, and more access to extracurricular activities. When asked, based on current data, fewer students will attend SMCPS in the future, so please rate your support for the following strategies to provide high quality education for all students: new construction and additions, off-site programs such as early college and internships, and rebuilding or renovating schools for well-sized programs were the top three. However, the third one comes with a comma. And we recognize that when we have longer responses, some folks only read to the comma. It's okay, I do that, I skim. So we just caveat that perhaps folks didn't read the second part that said, then closing and repurposing facilities for other community or educational needs. The other one that we saw strong support in was also specialty magnet and choice programs to draw enrollment from overutilized to underutilized campuses. CTE pathways. Your school district provides quite a few, and we asked which of the following pathways are of interest to you and your family. Overwhelmingly, engineering was number one, followed by cybersecurity, and followed by the Academy of Health Professions or health-related pathways. We asked about pre-K. 78% of respondents support pre-K at all elementary schools. 28 support it only at pre-K centers, and 55 support at or near high schools. So what this told us was that only at pre-K centers was not something that your community would support, so that's not something that we should suggest or think about, but that the other two might be viable options when we're thinking about options for pre-K. In every survey that we do, we leave an open comment section, and these are some of the open comment themes that we saw. Overwhelmingly, number one was about property values. Many mentioned that they bought their house in a certain location to go to a specific school. Others were class sizes and overcrowding, with a preference for smaller class sizes, particularly at the high school level. School quality and equity, with an emphasis on the importance of maintaining or improving school quality and equitable access to programs, and ensuring all schools were well-resourced. Facilities and maintenance, with concerns expressed about HVAC and mold. Night one, we were a little chilly in the gym, so I felt that there. Teacher pay and retention was another one, with calls for higher teacher salaries and better support for educators, which is always nice to see that the folks of the community care about the students teaching their children, so we appreciated reading that as well. So what are our key takeaways? Our key takeaways from the survey was that there's a high response rate from people that felt like they were likely to be affected. And those were mainly from folks who had attended or would attend Leonardtown. We also saw, again, a high response rate from Esperanza, but also from Chopticon and Great Mills and Evergreen as well. There was an importance placed on security and safety, as that was the highest ranked importance for school experience in that question. And that we learned that newer buildings might not convince people, but quality programs and opportunities for their students might. So our options shy away from newer and more towards how do we balance to provide those quality programs. Key takeaways also included affecting the fewest number of families and keeping kids from the same neighborhoods together were themes that were important. Better funded teachers, district transportation, and more extracurricular opportunities were also important. And off-site programs, and especially in magnet programs, have strong support. And that we should also consider pre-K at all elementary schools or at high school centers, like with a specialized pathway where kids are teaching students and stuff like that. We are now going to go into our options, our possible options, but first Lee's going to talk about some options modeling, and then I'm going to come back. But what we want to remind folks, and we're going to say this a lot, is that these are possible options. These are maybe options. These are our first pass at options that we're presenting to you all tonight. Nothing is final. We still have many more steps to go.
So as Kia had mentioned, before we sat down to do any kind of development of boundary options, we did a little bit of prep work through some modeling to really level set our expectations of what's actually possible, what can happen, and what really can't happen. So one of the first things that we did was, one of the charges from the school district is to balance utilization. So what you see up here is the result of a model where we try to balance utilization at 85%. And that's because currently, with the number of elementary students there are in the district versus the capacity at the elementary level, the utilization is 85% district-wide. So that's where we start. So can we balance every school to right around 85%? And using a model called a maximum capacitated coverage model, we run the numbers through, and this is the result. So what you see here are basically from every school you see lines going out to where a student lives. And the model pulls students in to fill the school up to 85% of their capacity. So you can see for the most part how the boundaries could look. You see in some areas where, like Dinard, boundary becomes fairly large because of the lower density of students around that area and the amount of seats they have. But you also see some overlap in the lines as well. And what that basically tells you is that there are some areas that would be on the outskirts of these boundaries where it may be a little more difficult to start to balance unless you really specifically start, picking students one by one in different areas. And one of the goals of this exercise was to keep neighborhoods together, which we'll see a little later on. So basically the challenge here is that a lot of students would be moving, and some neighborhoods could end up being split if we just followed the pattern of the model. So another thing that we looked at was looking at the socioeconomics. Looking to possibly, can we balance diversity across the school district through the socioeconomics? One of the results we got from the survey was that the socioeconomic diversity wasn't as high on the list as other things that we asked about in the survey, so not as important. But nonetheless, we looked at it. What you see in this model now is that currently at the elementary level, 34% of elementary students have free or reduced lunch. So if we were to take the capacity at every building and fill them up to 34% by looking at free and reduced lunch students, what would that necessitate? So what you see here is the result of that. Same idea with the lines. trying to pull in students up to 34% of capacities at each school. But here you see some areas even toward, or particularly like in the center of the county, you'll see a lot of long lines out there, which means you have to go very far to try to balance that diversity. But you also see a lot of overlap, right? And so this result tells us that it'd be even tougher to try to balance that diversity. The good news is that, based on the survey results, it wasn't as important as other items, so this is not something that we took into consideration when we were creating those boundaries. So the last model we ran, which I'm sure a lot of you parents out there are probably thinking, well, why can't we just go to our closest school? Based on where students live, based on the capacities out there, this is the model we ran. And so the colors here represent the roads throughout the county and which roads basically would be assigned to each school. They don't look that bad when you're looking at it on a map. However, when you start to look at, let me go to this next here, the result was basically you can't balance the capacity, and I'll show you here right now. So this table shows the result of that model. Lexington Park would be at 168% with 850 students at the very extreme high end. At the very extreme low end, Town Creek would have 70 students and only be filled at 27%. So if you recall, the district average is 85% utilization. Only 2 schools in this model would actually be at 81 and 89%, which would be Evergreen and Dent. And if you recall from that map, those boundaries would be very, very small because of the density of students. So ultimately, the result is that to go to your closest school is virtually impossible for most of the school district because of the locations of schools, the capacities that they have, and where students are actually located. And this is just a bar chart of the table you saw earlier, ranking or sorting everything from highest to lowest.
All right. So before we present options, everywhere we go, we ask the room to take the pledge of yes if. Now, as we said before, this is our first step in presenting options, which means that there is a likelihood that there's some tweaking that could or should be done in order to make these options more plausible. But what is easy in this process, especially when it affects folks and they're so passionate about where they go to school, is to just say no. And what we ask is for you to take a yes if approach. Like, yes, this option could work if you consider, or yes, this option could work if we also do. So instead of just saying no, we ask that you all take an effort to say yes if. So as a reminder, priorities from the school district. We received priorities as a part of our RFP process, which is our request for proposals. Basically, the school district tasked us to have this process be an effective and efficient use of capital resources in a fiscally responsible manner. Also, to optimize the use of the facilities and maximize opportunities for student achievement while allowing for the delivery of the best instructional program possible within the available facility and financial resources. Additionally, an additional task was to relieve overcrowding. So those were some priorities that came directly from the school district. But we can't lose sight of, and we didn't lose sight of when we built these options, of what you guys said in Community Survey 1 and the takeaways that we just went over around an importance for security and safety, quality programs and opportunities for everyone, affecting the fewest number of families, keeping kids from the same neighborhoods together. Those are principles that we also took with us when building these options as well.
Okay, I'm back. So, some assumptions for the options development. Before we did anything, there are some kind of givens that we have to make assumptions about, and this is that list. So number one is that Chesapeake students are not included in any of these counts. They are a magnet program with no boundary, and so the assumption is that those students will continue to attend Chesapeake. The counts only include students that reside within St. Mary's County Public Schools. There are a number of students that travel in from outside the county to attend St. Mary's County Public Schools, and they are not included in any of these counts. I think the surrounding counties would be a little upset if I just started drawing boundaries into their counties to grab those students. Special education pre-K kids are not included in the counts. These counts fluctuate from year to year, and those programs are really based on where the space is available from year to year. So you'll see some data in these packets tonight where we talk about how many students are affected. And the number of students affected is based on where students are enrolled today versus where they could possibly be assigned within the options. We only use permanent capacity in our calculations. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the portables and trailers at schools. That's called the portable capacity. But we only use the permanent capacity in these utilization calculations. So subdivisions as a part of the results of the survey, but even when we do redistricting around the country, is part of a given that we have is that subdivisions are not split and are kept intact. And so subdivisions in these cases are how they are defined by the county and recorded. So you'll see in the options that here, elementary school options are paired with middle school options, unless it's otherwise noted. So elementary school option 1 is paired with middle school option 1. Elementary option 2 is actually paired with 2 others, so that's where it's otherwise noted, and then so on. The high school options, that is not the case for those. Those are independent of elementary and middle school options, and so they stand on their own. Okay, so without further ado, elementary and middle school option 1. The goal of this option is to balance utilization across the school district. As I mentioned earlier, the utilization is 85%, so that was the goal for each school. In this option, all elementary schools feed 100% into middle schools. So there are no split elementaries where if your student has a friend going into the next level at middle school, they would be split into 2 separate middle schools. So everyone moves to middle schools together. In option 1, excuse me, 34% of elementary students are affected, while 17% of middle school students are affected. So the benefits of this option are that it balances utilization fairly well at every school. Students can stay together into the middle school careers. Because of the utilization balance, there is room to absorb any growth that may happen anywhere in the county. And in this option, no middle schools are over 100% capacity. One challenge is that it does affect a large number of students, about 1/3 of elementary students across the district. So elementary option 2 with middle school option 2A. The goal of this is to alleviate the areas with extreme overcrowding or ones that have very low utilization, so kind of on both ends. Trying not to impact too many students, so mitigating as much change as we can and trying to alleviate the areas of over and underutilization. So, obviously this option moves the least number of students out of any of the options. Again, elementary schools feed 100% into middle school. 23% of elementary students are affected, while 22% of middle school students are affected in this option. So benefits, very similar. Students get to stay together into middle school. We do alleviate the very high and the very low areas of utilization across the district. It balances out the schools that really do need it across the school district. There is still some room for growth because we didn't change the boundaries for every single school out there. We still have room for growth in some areas. And of course, it moves the least number of students. So part of the challenge here is that there's still a wide range of utilizations across the district, across the elementaries. In this option, Margaret Brent would be utilized over 100%. Esperanza's enrollment would be a little smaller, and that could pose some challenges in terms of programming. And the Spring Ridge boundary does come fairly close to the actual physical location of Leonardtown Middle School. So elementary option 2 and middle school option 2B. Virtually exactly the same as 2A, except to help balance the Margaret Brent utilization that is over 100% in 2A, we've split the Oakville and Banneker elementary boundaries to 2 different middle schools so that we can balance out the Margaret Brent utilization. And so now all the middle schools are under 100% utilized and more balanced. Everything else is basically the same. Elementary and middle school option 3. So this one, we are repurposing White Marsh Elementary School and then rebalancing the utilization across the remaining schools. With White Marsh capacity offline, the utilization across the school district would be 88%. So that was the goal. Again, this option, all elementaries feed into the middle schools 100% together. Again, neighborhoods remain intact. In this option, 36% of elementary school students are affected, while 17% of middle school students are affected. So this one affects the most number of elementary students at 36 versus option 1, which was 34%. So the benefits of this option does actually help to plan for long-term growth. And it may seem a little counterintuitive by taking capacity offline, but there's a couple of things behind that. It does accelerate the state funding eligibility. So for school districts in Maryland to be funded by the state, a school needs to be at least 150% utilized before they will trigger money to help with additions or new construction. Once that construction starts, that school needs to have 100% of their enrollment ready to go into that school once it's completed. So an elementary school may take about 3 years. So in that 3 years, you'll need to have that additional 50% to make that 100% utilized as the day that the school opens. It does expand program opportunities in this option because we're increasing the enrollment at schools, and it really becomes a part of looking at economies of scale. White Marsh currently has, part-time music teachers, part-time art teachers that go between schools. With more enrollments and more funding behind those students, you're able to actually begin hiring full-time teachers at those schools. Yep. It does create operational and capital cost savings because you're taking deferred maintenance off the books. And one thing about that I wanted to mention, with White Marsh, they are within 5 minutes of 2 other elementary schools that have just been recently renovated. So we're walking through the inside, it's bright, they've got great spaces for modern day education. And also, White Marsh has not had any significant state dollars put into it. And the reason I tell you this is because if the state funds any kind of construction or capital improvements, and that school is no longer being used by the school district, all that money needs to be returned to the state. So another benefit is that, as I mentioned before, 2 other schools newly modernized and renovated, those students would have access to that modern space. And it does address the low utilizations in all across the district and balances out utilization at the elementary level. A challenge. It is a blue ribbon school, 5-star school. There could be longer transportation times for Banneker students and Spring Ridge students in this option. So this is just a table kind of summarizing the options that I've just presented, summarizing the number of students impacted in the ranges for that. We have the utilization ranges within each option, and also the benefits and challenges that we just went through.
All right. So if everybody could open their phones back up and scan the QR code if you didn't leave your browser open. We are going to do a poll that is going to ask you your strongly agree, strongly disagree scale for each of the options individually. Now I know you just got a lot of information, but you're doing your gut reaction to what you just received as information, and then you'll have a chance to talk about it. This is the question. Individually, how do you feel about the elementary and middle school options? You get to rank each of them individually. So option 1, balanced utilization, between strongly disagree and strongly agree. How do you feel? The humps on the graph tell you kind of where the distribution of what people felt are. So if there's a hump in the middle, that's because a decent number of people who have voted so far are more in the middle about that option, versus a hump at the end says that they more strongly agree with that option. All right, with about 15 folks left to vote, this is how folks feel like individually, and they're gonna jump around a little bit as I talk about them. So if I get it wrong temporarily, it's because someone voted. Individually, for balanced utilization, option 1 for the elementary and the middle schools, we're sitting around a 3.2. So 3 is neutral or average, and so a 3.2 trends slightly towards agree, but not very much. And you can see at that hump that there is some folks that strongly disagree with that. And it kind of levels out when we go to the middle and to strongly agree. For option 2, alleviate areas of over and underutilization with a 100% feeder pattern, there's a large contingency of folks that strongly disagree, some folks that sit in the middle, and very few, but some folks that strongly agree with that option. So it sits around what was a 2.3 is now a 2.4 that trends towards disagree. For option 2B, we can see it's a little polarized. We have some folks who strongly disagree, but a large number of grouping of folks who feel neutral about it, and a decent chunk of folks who agree or strongly disagree with it. So that explains a score of a 2.7, though that does trend towards disagree. And option 3 is the least popular in the, well, that changed because 2.8 moved, but option 3 has a very strong contingency of folks that strongly disagree with that option, and not many, but some that have differing opinions as it goes along in the effort. So that explains a score of a 2.4. So that's what 77 out of 83 folks responding to this. All right, what is next? Next, you're about to have 20 to 30 minutes to talk about these options with your tables. And that is because folks here have different relationships, different understandings, different feelings about the options, and then you're going to vote as a group. You're going to come to consensus, and you're going to fill out the same table about how you feel about each of the options as a group. If half the table feels like it's a 5 and half the table feels like it's a 1, you would vote like a 3, for example. And so we're going to ask you to do that for 20 minutes. We're going to float around and be around to answer questions, and then we'll see how and if these numbers move after conversation. Off the bat, I think we can say that these scores are lower than when we did these individually, but we're going to go through them one by one really quickly before we talk about high schools. Option 1 got a 2.3, which with most folks voting is a 1, right? It was at a 3.2 when we voted individually. Now it's at a 2.3. Option 2A probably saw the most change. Before, it was sitting at a 2.4. Now it is sitting at a 1.4 when we voted as groups. There are some folks that voted outside of that strongly disagree, but not many. Option 2B scored a 2 strongly with a little hum for a 3 and at least one group who probably voted a 5 on that option. But overall, it was a 2. Before, it was a 2.8. And for option 3 to close White Marsh, it ranked a 1.9 when we voted as groups. You can see that strong contingency again, scored it as a strongly disagree as a 1, 1.8, oh, okay. But there are some who see that as neutral, as a neutral option. Again, we want to remind you that the folks in the room tonight are overwhelmingly from Leonardtown. So we understand that some of these options, particularly option 2, does not sit well for a lot of folks, and that's okay. We also want to remind you that we did this on 2 other nights, and these scores were different for the other 2 parts of the county that we went to, and that makes sense as well, right? Because these options affect different people differently.
So the goal in the high school options, we have 3 of them. The goal here is to basically try to balance utilization across the 3 high schools. District-wide, the utilization for high schools is 104%. However, when you go into specific high schools, right now, Leonardtown is utilized the most at 124%. High school option 1, the utilization percentage ranges that we have for each of the high schools, between all 3 high schools, is anywhere from 103 to 106%. Again, neighborhoods remain intact. High school option 1 really impacts the northern portion of the Leonardtown high school boundary. Most of the kind of northern, northwestern portion of it. There's an area on the northeastern side of the Leonardtown boundary that is assigned to Great Mills. The other northern part is assigned to Chopticon. And in this, also the Elizabeth Hills neighborhood is assigned to Great Mills High School. We do have a note in here about Breton Bay. We know that there's potential development coming up in that area. And right now, the idea is that depending on how development transpires in the area and what types of numbers of students and enrollment that those neighborhoods produce, those new neighborhoods that start to pop up could be assigned to Chopticon, okay? So in high school option 1, 12% of high school students are affected. The benefits of this, it is a good balance of enrollment between 103 and 106% when the district averages is 104. It does create more equitable educational program opportunities for all 3 high schools. The challenge, of course, is that all 3 high schools are still overutilized. Of course, a big challenge is that we would need to overcome decades of high school history and status quo across the school district. So, high school option 2. The ranges here are anywhere from 103 to 106%, very similar to option 1. Neighborhoods stay intact. Here, you can start to see a little difference in the northern part of the Leonardtown High School boundary, where kind of that central northern area gets flipped with the Breton Bay area. So the northern portion of Leonardtown and far western central area of Leonardtown boundary would be assigned to Chopticon. There is still that small sliver in the northeast part of Leonardtown that is assigned to Great Mills. And again, Elizabeth Hills is assigned to Great Mills in this option. Benefits and challenges here, basically the same. And you'll start to see that between all the options, it's, just kind of slight changes in different geographies to try to balance the enrollment between all three schools. So high school option 3. The utilization ranges here are actually a little tighter, between 103 and 105%, which really equates to maybe 15 students. Neighborhoods remain intact. Again, the northern area, more of the northern area of Leonardtown is assigned to Chapticon. That northeastern portion still assigned to Great Mills. And in this, Elizabeth Hills is also assigned to Great Mills. In summary, all three options impact anywhere from 11 to 12% of students at the high school level. We range anywhere from 103 to 106%. Again, the benefits and challenges the same, balances out enrollment, but all high schools are still overutilized. And keep in mind the statement we made earlier about how state funding works to get 150% and then having to have 100% of that enrollment by the time the school opens. And of course, the big challenge is to overcome decades of high school history, which is a very, very tough thing to do.
Okay, once more, we're going to do a gut reaction on how folks feel individually about the three options that were presented for the high school. So if you could open your phones again or scan the QR code on your tables or on the screen. So with 3/4 of folks who had signed up to responding, we are sitting that option 1 is around 2.6. You can see there's a pretty large hump that say strongly disagree. Okay, 2.7 now. A strong contingent in the middle, though, that are also feel neutrally about this option. Option 2, alleviating areas of over and underutilization, similar hump, though a lot more people are in that disagree or strongly disagree area, which explains why it's a 2.3. And then option 3 has the highest support right now with a 2.8, though it is pretty spread. It just has a few more folks who are voting it as agree and strongly disagree when compared to the others. With 14 out of the 16 groups having voted, let's see where we went. Option 1 is a 2.4 from a 2.6, so it went down after conversation. That's okay. Option 2 was a 2.3, is now a 1.9, so folks liked that less after having conversations and voting as a group. Okay, now it's a 2, oh, okay, we're done. Option 3 is a 2.4, before it was a 2.8, so all of them, okay, option 1 stayed at a 2.6, but all of the other two went down. Again, notice the humps in how some groups voted that are maybe a little different than how your group voted. Option 2, we did get some folks who agreed with it. Same with option 3, maybe 1 or 2 of those groups. Someone asked me this week, why do you do this? Like, why do you come to really warm rooms and deal with some passionate people about topics that are hard? And that's because we believe in it as a process and as helping school districts do what's right for all of their students. There's 17,000 students in St. Mary's County School District, right? We're trying to figure out options with your help that gives them the best outcomes across the school district. Redistricting is not fun. It isn't my favorite, I would say, part of my job. But I do think that the work is meaningful for long-term health of the school district, of any school district, especially as you're combating growth or decline, which is impacting a lot of the country right now. So again, genuinely thank you for coming. And you guys were all, I know some people feel heated, you guys were all very calm in your criticisms, and I very much appreciate them. As a reminder, we have a website and a survey. And so this is survey number 2 that opens on Monday and will be open through December 5th. Now, we mentioned this to some of you at your tables, but After each option that you choose to answer for, there is a question that's going to ask you why you felt that way, okay? And that is an opportunity for you to write in your yes if. This would be better if you did X, right? Or write, like, there's no way this could be possible because of X, Y, and Z. I would encourage a yes if, but I do understand that some might just not work for you. And that's going to be posted on the website. And if you have any questions in the interim, please feel free to email redistricting@smcps.org. Now, you can imagine after us doing these for 3 days, there are a lot of emails to be read and responded to. So if you could please give us some time to catch back up to responding to those, that would be great. And then another reminder about our process. So tonight was step 1 of looking at draft options. These are not the final options. We're going to read through your comments in the survey for what your sentiments are, for how you feel, and some of those options may get adjusted if we can make it work, right? We do this process as almost like a call and response. We want your input, we want your thoughts, and if we can accommodate them or make the option better through it, we will try our darndest, okay? There are 8 more steps, one of those being a public forum that happens late January, early February, where after we've presented to the board, you guys will get an opportunity to speak and say your piece to them before they vote on the options, okay? And again, they don't have to take our recommendation. You will know what our recommendation is, but the board can take all of it, none of it, pieces. It is up to them how it gets enacted. Okay, and a final plug for the website and taking the survey, and please spread the word, because we've enjoyed engaging with you tonight, and we would encourage others, if they have questions or comments or concerns, to continue doing the same, especially over the next couple months. Mike?
Thank you, Kia. Just a round of applause for our presenters this evening, Canon Design. I also want to thank our digital media team tonight. We have a lot of staff here recording this and making sure that this goes off without a hitch. A lot of student volunteers as well, so thank you, our digital media team. As Kia said, everything will be up on our website on Monday. The survey and all that information will be up there. So again, all this information will be posted to our website on Monday. The survey will be active on Monday as well. So with that, thank you for spending some of your evening with us tonight.